Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. And as I mentioned in my last video, sometimes I like sharing videos from other channels. And that's what I'm going to do today. We're going to have a special guest that makes me look like an amateur in what I'm doing here. But we're going to go visit the Caddo Mounds in Texas, and this has been described as the southwesternmost area of the so-called Mound Builder civilization. And this comes from about 1,200 years ago. Here you look at this area today, and there was 3 main mounds here. There seemed to be a temple mound and a burial mound, and then another mound off here. But let's just jump over to a couple of websites and just do some quick reading here. Now here is just one website that I will leave a link to below, but this has a few pics in it I thought were worth sharing of the site. And this is located in East Texas, in Weeping Mary, Texas is the little city's name. Here is some artifacts, some implements, some artifacts that were found here. Looks like antler. And those look like pretty well-made tools coming from 800 to 1,200 years ago. Now here is a pic from a website I found. I will leave that link below too. But this is the top of one of the mounds, and you can see how it's terraced, and this stonework, I'm assuming, is modern. Now I will leave this website below, but this has some information on the location and visiting, and a few other things, a few pics. And the mailing address, I guess, is Alto, Texas, but Weeping Mary is the tiny town that is by, I guess. Here are some activities. And it has a short video here, and I'm just going to play just a little bit of this, and I will leave a link for the full video below.
This village developed into a major ceremonial center and flourished for the next 500 years. At its height, an elite class of spiritual and political leaders governed a population of 600 to 900 farmers, hunters, and craftspeople. During this time, corn became a major crop. The bow and arrow, which allowed for more efficient hunting, replaced the spear, and pottery was created to serve everyday purposes and artistic expression. As the village grew, 3 mounds were constructed that marked important ceremonial areas. The burial mound, where community leaders were interred, grew over time. As each generation of religious and political leaders died and were buried, the mound grew in height. The 2 other mounds were temple or ceremonial platforms used for religious activities and community gatherings. They were also built up slowly over time. Much of what is known about the early Caddo has been learned from the archaeological research carried out at the site. The first excavation at the site was conducted by the Federal Works Progress Administration between 1939 and 1941. The high temple mound was excavated, uncovering ceramic and stone ceremonial artifacts, and the site was recorded as a George C. Davis site, named after the landowner at the time. 30 years later, archaeologist Deanne Story from the University of Texas at Austin led the most significant exploration of the site from 1968 through 1970. Thousands of artifacts were carefully excavated and analyzed by Dr. Story. The site was acquired by the state in 1974 for preservation and ongoing research, and opened to the public in 1982. More recently, new information has been obtained about the village without digging by using a machine called a magnetometer, which employs sensors to measure the strength and direction of a magnetic anomaly beneath the ground surface.
The magnetometer is used to detect subtle changes in the Earth's magnetic fields that are a result of human occupation. When we pull it across a site, we're able to use it to map the various activities that have taken place on an archaeological site.
The magnetometer has been instrumental in locating hearths, houses, and other cultural features at the site. This data, combined with aerial photography, has allowed archaeologists to generate a clearer idea about the size and density of this once thriving settlement.
And this here comes from the Interpretation Center. I'm assuming here you see the mound in the background. And it says the burial mound was about 20 feet tall and about 90 feet in diameter when the village was abandoned. A series of archaeological excavations beginning in 1939 determined that it was built in successive stages over a period of about 700 years, ending about 1300 AD, and it contained about 90 bodies in about 30 burial pits. Now, those of you who follow my channel know I like to present good research done by other channels, especially when I'm trying to get through a whole series here and get through many different sites. So it's really cool when another channel makes their videos shareable, and especially when it comes from a researcher who really knows what he's doing. It makes me look like an amateur. So, welcome to the big stage, Ryan Rocha, and take it away.
Hi, this is Ryan Rocha reporting from R&R Studios. Today on this episode of Culture Corner, we will be discussing a native tribe to Texas, the Caddo Indians. The Caddo Indians lived in the lands of East Texas, spanning through Oklahoma and Louisiana. The Caddo Indians lived in enormous grass huts that were at least 30 feet tall, could usually fit 20 to 30 people. Holy cheese and rice, that's huge. You would think something this large would take a long time to build, but as the entire tribe pitched in, it only took a day to construct these massive huts. Let's take a closer look and see how these huts look from the inside. As you could see, these huts were constructed of mainly wood poles and blankets of tightly woven grass. They wrapped around the hut's layers to keep out the rain. The women made the grass blankets, while the men constructed the outer shell. The Caddo Indians were also known for building large mounds in special places where their leaders and priests, known as Zanisis, lived. Some mounds were platforms for their temples, where special rituals were held, and other mounds, the Caddo people buried their leaders in elaborate tombs. This painting shows what it would have been like during a funeral for a Caddo leader. Another interesting fact about the Caddo Indians was they were farmers. The women did the harvesting of the crops usually consisting of corn, beans, pumpkins, and sunflowers, while the Caddo men hunted for deer, buffalo, and also small wild game. They also went fishing along the rivers. This particular image is of a canoe that was dug up near the Red River, which is a river widely used by the Caddo. This leads us to our last topic about the Caddo Indians. They were a very creative tribe in constructing tools which they used to survive. They were experienced bow and arrow makers, using wood of the bois d'arc tree. Boy, that's a mouthful. Here's a few photos of the tools they would use. The women would also create beautiful handmade pottery that would be used for cooking as well as for trading. Man, that's a new idea for Mother's Day. Note, some of these images you have seen come from the Caddo Mounds State Historic Site in Alto, Texas. I really recommend you check it out. Not sponsored. Well, that brings us to the close of this week's Culture Corner. I'm Ryan Rocha, signing off. Now time to play the Xbox. My dad hasn't let me do that in a while.
Now, I will leave the link to Ryan's full video below, and at the end, he also has some bloopers on there for you to check out. And I'm sure if you leave some comments on his video and tell him how much we appreciate his research and his fine presentation. I like the little Vegas flair also, and I really enjoyed that, and I'm glad to share it. Hope you thought that was cool, and you all have a very nice day.